Hello and welcome back to the Private Client Podcast. For those tuning in for the first time, I'm Charlie Chami, an independent financial advisor and director at Glams IFA and co-founder of the Private Client Network. We are on a mission to bring together different private client professionals so we can all increase our knowledge, improve the service to our clients, and grow our respective businesses. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking to the wonderful Amy Buckley, partner and head of tax for Central and West at the international accounting and tax advisory firm Azets. After doing a degree in maths and finance, Amy spent 16 years at PwC before taking up her current role at Azets 2 years ago. Amy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Charlie. Lovely to be here.
So, I've got a friend who's a tax advisor and her favorite tax is VAT. I've got no idea why. I wondered, do you have a favorite tax?
Well, as a private client partner, anything relating to private client has to be my favorite tax. So it's about how they all interlink together and how you can support your clients. You can't look at one area of tax without considering the other.
That is so true. And I feel like that should be sort of advice to anyone taking tax exams at the moment, because yeah, they absolutely do interact. And I guess one tax avoided is another tax incurred often. So yeah, that is true. I'm desperate to ask you what you think is going to come up in the next budget, but I will restrain that for the moment. So what I want to ask you, obviously you studied maths and finance all the way back at university. So did you always know you were going to go into this area?
So I did A-levels in maths, economics and law, and did work experience in a solicitor's firm. Having taken my work experience, I thought actually working as a solicitor wasn't for me. So I went to a careers advisor and said, my background is maths. I like the legal side of things. How could the both of them interact? And somebody said, why don't you go into tax? And that's how I started my career in tax.
So that was before applying to university places?
I think by that point, I thought I'm going to do a maths degree because that's a good opening to anything. And it was careers advisory in university where I learned about going into tax.
Yeah, it makes sense. So finished that, graduated. How did you find the process of going from graduating to getting your first job in the industry? Was that relatively straightforward?
That was a very long time ago, Charlie.
I know, we start at the beginning.
So I think what I've learned, it's all about your networks and connections, because I did work experience in, I worked through my summer holidays when I was doing my A-levels and through degree. And that person I did the work for said, actually, there's an opportunity for you in the local firm that does my accounts. So that's how I got my first introduction into tax, because of who I knew.
Yeah, it is always that way. The reason I ask is because there's sort of a lot of people that listen will be sort of earlier on in their careers, or maybe even starting out, and it's something that solicitors have usually got a story about it as well, because that sort of is a notoriously difficult field to get into. I just wondered if the same thing applies to sort of tax advisory. I mean, I certainly know it does with firms like PwC. I know you didn't start at PwC, but they can be, I mean, their grad scheme recruitments are notoriously hard. How was that after starting at the local firm, getting a job at PwC? How was that?
I think I had good grounding across all taxes in a local firm. I was exposed to things like, as your friend enjoys VAT, I was exposed to VAT. I was exposed to corporation tax. My first project was the introduction of company car P11Ds. So I got to actually experience everything. And I think when you're starting in your career, it's good to have a grounding across all areas. And that's what I got from a smaller firm. And actually, when I went into that larger firm within PwC, I specialized at that point.
Is that when you sort of moved to the private client side of things?
Yeah, I was doing a bit of everything in the smaller firm, but actually I think within the larger firms you do specialize more, which is great. It gave me great grounding and why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Are you dealing with similar clients at Azets to who you were dealing with previously? Are they sort of similar client profiles?
I think the beauty of Azets is the diversity of the client base. So, and actually, what I was doing in PwC was probably more international private client. I've got international private clients within Azets, but I've also got some local owners of manufacturing businesses, for example. So I think it's the diversity is the distinction.
Yeah, that makes sense. When do you guys get brought into to a client process? Are you generally pick up clients from referrals from other professionals, or do they approach you directly, or do you deal with their accounts and then you're sort of, is it an internal, do you get it passed on internally to deal with the sort of owner directors?
So we have three core lines of service within our business, within Azet. So we have our accounting and business advisory services, our audit services, and our tax services. So we work very closely with our accounting business advisory service and our audit services to deliver the tax work for those. So part of our work comes from existing clients. Part of our work becomes from our network and who we know, and part of it comes through our reputation. Of I've been in the business for the business. I've been working in tax for 22 years, so quite a few people know me and refer work to me that way as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So if they come across, will you be doing things as sort of straightforward? I mean, I know the higher up the value chain you go, nothing is straightforward, but will you be doing client tax returns, or is it always a sort of an event, maybe a sale of, a sale of a business or asset sales, or how does it work between sort of one-off and ongoing services?
So we can offer both. So we can do everything from compliance up to advice. Equally, a number of my clients work with their local accountants, and their local accountants do not have the experience or the expertise within their team to do the advisory work. So we will step in and do that one-off piece of advisory
Mhm.
work and then step back away. So if it's a life event that somebody needs some support on from a tax perspective, then we will do that. And actually, we've got a number of smaller accountancy firms where we support on just that, just doing the advisory work and then being there when they need that extra. But equally, we can do the compliance as well.
And what's the typical, so you say life events, but what are we talking about?
So if you're, for example, I've got a client who's just sold part of his business, thinking about what he's going to do with the rest of his business, thinking of passing it down to some of the shares down to his daughter. And actually, he's just had a grandchild. So actually, how does that fit into things, making provisions for the grandchild? Just generally, we do a lot around succession planning, inheritance tax planning, selling businesses, etc.
Yeah, makes sense. How did you find? So so I know you've been dealing with private clients for a while, but I had my previous role, I was very much dealing with institutional investors, and then I moved to financial advice, and I was dealing with private individuals for the first time. And I remember finding that transition it was really interesting, but I found it hard to begin with because the dynamics of dealing with corporates versus individuals is quite different. How do you find the sort of interpersonal side of dealing with individuals?
That's what I love about my job. That's the favourite bit about my job is by connecting with individuals, actually sitting across the table and them feeling comfortable to be able to tell me how we can support them. But you actually need to know a lot about those individuals because without knowing that detail, you can't advise them fully. So, as I said, I've been doing this a long time and my clients feel comfortable to have those conversations with me. But it's building up those relationships. Relationships are key.
It is nice. I found it's simultaneously it can be quite difficult dealing because obviously you deal with emotions, I think, far more when dealing with private individuals. But in some ways, I do think it is more satisfying because of that. You're quite close to the impact of the advice that you give. You've got very, very tangible benefits to an individual who's sat in front of you. Um, and I presumably with what you guys, it's a very measurable benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people think about, for example, they think, oh, I want to gift my house to my children. Lots of people have lots of conversations around that. And actually, what does that mean, from a tax perspective? And people don't always realise that. And if they go into that transaction with their eyes closed, they could be tripping up lots of tax issues. So actually, when we can say to them, actually, it's not just about, don't think of this one area in isolation, think about everything. How can we help you with everything? What's the right result for you from a personal perspective? And obviously, we want to make sure the tax works as well. So when I have a conversation with a client, I always go in with a blank piece of paper and say, just tell me about you. Not actually, when a client comes in and says, I want to do this one transaction, actually, there's definitely, in most cases, there's a bigger picture you need to consider.
So let's use that as an example. So the client with, did you say a house that he's thinking of gifting? Mm-hmm. What sort of things are going through your head when someone presents with that particular question or problem?
Do they live in that house? Are they going to continue to live in that house? If they're going to continue to live in that house from a tax perspective, HMRC will say you've never given it away, and it doesn't actually achieve anything from a tax perspective. And actually, what else have you got in your estate? Is that the best thing to do?
As in, like, sometimes it's easier to gift so they come in starting thinking about their property, but is it easier to gift other assets?
Is cash or shares in a business, etc.
Do they get on with their kids?
Well, that is really important, isn't it? Yeah. So yes, lots of different avenues that you can talk about with individuals.
The other one you can ask, do other kids, how's their marriage? I mean, you have to ask these questions. It's kind of a difficult one, but if you're thinking of gifting, or this is sometimes something we come across, if there's a question mark over the adult child's relationship, then maybe they want to think about the timing of that gift.
And we do talk to individuals about trusts around asset protection by putting assets in a trust. But I always think the most valuable conversation with an individual client is when you're there in the room and you've got financial advisor there, us from a tax perspective, and then probably their lawyer as well, because we're all coming in from different angles and we can provide the very best advice by having all those expertise in one room.
It's true. And it's interesting because this conversation is very similar to the conversations that I will have with trust and estate solicitors. Do you guys so say there isn't a solicitor or financial advisor involved, will you sort of say to clients that you really should be seeking one out and sort of look to bring them in?
So absolutely, we will say whatever we are doing from a tax perspective, you need to be comfortable from a legal perspective. And we have a number of local intermediaries that we work with quite regularly. So we will present a number of options to clients. Obviously, we need to remain independent and wouldn't recommend any one solicitor, but we have got really great connections with local solicitors that we would give details of.
Yeah, it is helpful. And I agree. All of us do come at these problems from ever so slightly different angles and different emphases. And
absolutely.
And sometimes one angle is actually the most appropriate because it's the overriding. I don't know if it is very you're talking huge, big tax bills involved. Maybe it is the tax angle that is the overriding thing. Maybe it is the structure on trusts. It's interesting, and it does vary by client and client circumstance. It's certainly what we find anyway.
And some clients will have a different outlook. For example, I've got one client who actually inheritance tax planning is not their priority, actually making sure they've got income tax efficiency in their life. Whereas I've got other clients which will be very much inheritance tax planning. So actually sitting down, having that conversation, understand what they want.
It's a really interesting point. I mean, we get the IHT question comes up with us an awful lot, and clients asking whether they should be gifting to children and how they should be doing it. And we do talk to them about, because clients vary on IHT, like to the extent they want to mitigate it. So some are like, I want to reduce it as far as humanly possible. I want to make sure as little IHT is paid. Others are a little bit more pragmatic. They're like, actually, the kids are going to inherit quite a lot. we don't need to worry about mitigating every penny of IHT. But often what we do say to them is, whilst IHT is important, like you are our clients and we're advising you, and you need to make sure that you're retaining enough assets to see you through an unknown, final third of life. And the challenge I guess you have as well is, needs can vary quite a lot, and you don't know what they're going to be in
And
advance.
yeah, absolutely. And that's the point where we will say, we can give you this advice, but actually you need to be comfortable that you've got enough to sustain you for the rest of your life. And that's where financial advisor, which, comes into its own, because we can't do financial planning, but we can actually say, this is the implications if you do gift, but actually have you planned for that? I mean, some clients, they're like, I'm not concerned about the inheritance tax liability, but they like to know what it is so that they can tell their family, actually, this is what you've got to plan for. So
Sure.
actually just knowing sometimes give them that comfort.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think that goes across a lot of things. Just simply knowing what the picture is, so there's no shocks and surprises, is useful. They can take some time to get their head around it, and then help with
And
beneficiaries.
one thing that I'm doing a lot of at the moment is around business property relief.
Mm,
So a number of my clients are shareholders in private companies, thinking when they pass those shares down to the next generation, they will be free of inheritance tax. And in the majority of cases, it probably is if it's a trading company, but lots of people have stockpiled cash, because of the uncertainty that we've had over the last couple of years. Now, that cash could be exposed to inheritance tax. Now, certain clients aren't necessarily aware of that. So just explaining to them that the implications of that is really valuable as well.
yeah, that can be easily missed, and the rules around what is a trading company, and when you, because it is relatively easy to fall foul of those rules. I think particularly, and this is more your area, so I'm gonna ask you, but is it 20% of assets can't be invested, or is the maximum that of your company assets can be invested? Say you've got stocks and shares within your company.
It's not as easy clearly
Isn't
defined
it?
as that. There's a lot of case law on when you will get business property relief. It's wholly or mainly not an investment. So yes, I think you need to look at everything in the round together. There are certain tests that you need to look at, but I wouldn't like to say on this podcast that one specifically over the other. You have to look at all the factors in the round.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it was a big factor because obviously we've gone through a long period of time where interest rates were near zero. I mean, near on 15 years of it. So I think a lot of directors and owner directors were at a little bit of a loss of what to do with stockpiled cash, and they were looking to investments to sort of provide a return. I suspect that might ease off a little bit now that you can actually get a little bit of you can get a bit of return on cash, but that definitely was something that we'd see periodically. we are a few we are in the early throes of a new government.
Mm-hmm.
In the build up to the election, Labour were very clear on what taxes they would not touch, or would not raise, I should say, that being income tax, national insurance, and VAT. They were much quieter on the other taxes. What I mean, none of us have got a crystal ball, and of course, like no one should plan for rumored or anticipated rises. But have you guys got any thoughts on what may happen, or even what you would like to see or would not like to see?
I, as you said, none of us have got a crystal ball.
It's true.
We obviously know that the finished holiday let rules are changing.
Yeah.
We obviously know that there's a focus on the concept of non-domicile and looking at a residency-based rule. So we know those things are going to happen, and HMRC and the government are currently consulting on that at the moment. In terms of what may happen, lots of people are concerned that capital gains tax rates will change. Obviously, nobody knows that, but I think I have a number of clients who are already thinking about gifting, about maybe accelerating those gifts. But those are people who are already making plans to gift or sell anyway.
Yeah, the plans were already in motion. I imagine you guys take a very similar line. We always, whenever we actually come down with a recommendation, it is always based on current rules, because so many things get trailed in the press ahead of a budget or a statement, and often things don't come to fruition. It's happened over the years an awful lot with pensions, muted changes that don't come about. So yes, I would very much say go with the current rules. But yeah, I mean, you can just out of geeky interest, I do suspect there will be something potentially on CGT. And interestingly, I don't think they've actually decided, is my suspicion. You mentioned that they're consulting on a lot of these things. I think you're 100% right. I think the government are reaching out and trying to gauge opinion and in certain areas. So I actually don't think the decisions have been made yet. And I suspect they will only be finalized right before is it the 30th of October? They said the
30th of October, yes. Will be an
budget's gonna be.
interesting day for private client, I think.
It will be. It will be. I must admit, the amount of years that I've sat and diligently taken notes during one of those budget statements, only to sort of realize that all the press outlets have got all the highlights given to them in advance, and they produce nice summaries. And firms like Azets as well produce nice summaries for budget. So I try and listen more and take fewer notes in recent years. But I will be watching, as I suspect you will be.
Mm-hmm.
So, little something to end on. If you had any bit of advice for someone who wanted to go into your area or tax advice, and specifically dealing with private clients, any tips for someone entering or trying to enter the profession now?
I don't actually think that any degree that you do, I think you can go in to do tax. I think I would say that there's lots of good apprenticeships or graduate routes across lots of the larger firms. There's so much opportunity. Just put your CV out there and just get in front of people. I think that's the only advice I have.
Yeah, I think it's true, and it's interesting. The entry requirements for a lot of the big firms do seem to be changing. I mean, I think I graduated at a similar sort of time to you, and the entry requirements for all the big firms were very static. You needed a degree. You usually needed a 2-1, and without those, and it often needed to be in a relevant degree as well. But I think things have changed, and firms are more flexible, and they are looking.
When we interview our graduates now, we don't see their CV. We know that they will get that. I think we ask for a 2-1 at degree level. If we take on graduates, if we take on apprenticeships, it's different. But we don't see their CV for that very reason, just to make sure that actually we don't look about the academic history. We're just making sure we concentrate on the person that we're talking to.
Yeah, that makes sense. But quickly, as you mentioned it, what's the apprenticeship route? Because that is something that I think is, again, I mean, correct. It's certainly in banking and finance that wouldn't have existed when we were entering.
So we do take a number of individuals through from A level. So we not through from degree, but we do take a number of individuals from A level, and we will take them through their training that way.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it. I know you're busy. We were talking before the call that you are central England, west of England, but also all the way across South Wales into Swansea. So you've got a big territory to look after.
My region goes down as far as Truro, up as far as Nottingham, across as far west as Swansea, as far east as Gloucester. So that's my remit.
That is a lot of tax. That's a lot of tax to cover. Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it, and hopefully see you at one of our events very soon.
You absolutely will. Thank you.